Okay, so last year I talked to you about the microbiome, and this year I'm talking to you about the microbiome, and there's a good chance next year I'm going to talk to you about the microbiome. And here's the reason. Not only has it been discovered by the scientists, it's been discovered by finance. And it is as if the microorganisms we know are everywhere. They're in every animal, every plant, every blade of grass. And most of the time we think about microbiomes, we think about these pathogens as being pathogenic. However, they're everywhere. And this is a microorganisms per square inch study that was done. And if you'll notice, the toilet was the cleanest as far as the number of microbiomes, mainly because it had been cleaned. And all the rest of the stuff had not been cleaned. And if you look at the human body and the distribution of organisms across the body, they are, of course, in the mouth, the eyes, the ears, the throat, the bronchial tubes, the entire digestive tract from top to bottom, all of the skin, the breast milk secrete microorganisms. And so we are, in fact, mainly microorganisms. And the distribution of these microorganisms changes from the top of your head to the bottom. And so that some microorganisms predominate at the top, and a lot of them predominate at the bottom. But you can't really live effectively without them. And here again, you see the distribution of the difference of the organisms as they go from top to bottom. So literally, this is what you are. When you walk into a room, you are extruding microorganisms in every direction. With every breath that you expel, with just brushing up close to somebody, your microorganisms are being shared with their microorganisms. And it has been estimated, I mentioned last year, in the first hour of entering a building, you are going to excrete about 40 million microorganisms into whatever room you go into or whatever house you go into. So each person has 10 times more microorganisms than body cells. And so the human brain is 2.5 to 3 pounds, but our microorganisms alone are somewhere between 3 and 5 pounds. That raises the question is, are we human? No, we're mainly microorganisms. We're 90% microorganisms, 10% human cells, and which forms into a superorganism. Now, it's almost as if in the last decade or two, we have discovered a new organ. Okay, so we discovered the brain, yeah. We thought the heart was the center of feeling for a long period of time. Found out that actually it probably is the brain. But in the last 2 decades, we've discovered this whole nother organ or series of organs that actually are part of us and are absolutely necessary for our survival. So it's as if the control room for your body is actually your gut. You ever had the expression, I kind of feel it in my gut? Well, it comes from your gut. Your feelings come from your gut because the serotonin and dopamine in your body, 90% of it is made in your gut. So the control room here for GI function, CNS function, autonomic nervous system, and the immune system is from your gut. And it's seated at birth. And if you're unlucky enough to be a C-section person, then you're going to have a 500% increase in allergies, 300% increase in ADHA, celiac disease, type 1 diabetes, 70% increase, type 1 diabetics, if you're a cesarean section baby. So that now in most C-sections in many hospitals, after the baby is delivered, a vaginal swab from mother to baby is administered to inoculate the baby to mama. And excuse me, this diversity occurs over about a 2 or 3 year period, and so that you don't become adult-like in your bacterial diversity, excuse me, until you're about 3 years old. So what happens to these bugs? Well, the bugs cause fermentation. That's how we would see it in our primitive minds, is it's fermentation. And actually, the bugs produce alcohol in our body, about a can of beer a day, in every person. But most importantly, they make short-chain fatty acids, which then help the immune system and a variety of other mechanisms in which they are occurring that affect the barriers that occur in your intestines and the barriers that occur for the dissemination of potentially these new autoimmune diseases. Thank you very much. These bugs, as I said, can lead to both neural development, a balanced immune system, the barriers along and inside the colon, the intestines, and stomach. But they also make certain digestive nutrients that are absolutely essential, and you don't get any other way except by these microorganisms. And the human microbiome, we have splintered up the human body into multiple silos. So if you got a problem with your skin, you go see a skin doctor. Problem with your heart, you go see a heart doctor. You got a problem with the lungs, you go to see a lung doctor. But it may all be that all of this is being controlled from your intestines or from your microbiome itself. So let's talk for just a minute about agriculture. You say, well, this is a heart summit. Why don't you want to talk about agriculture? Well, agriculture is about microbiomes. So microbiomes, these microorganisms are in all of the tissues of the plant. Not only in the vascular system of the plant, they're in all of the tissues of the plant. So that in these crops, the microbiome is controlling how the micronutrients are going into the plant, and they're controlling how the plants respond to stress. And so this is a number of microbiomes on the left, and insects, fungi, bacteria, viruses, weeds, and on the right are the stresses that could occur to a plant. And what we have done in the world is we have taken and destroyed the microbiome of most of these plants, and that we either sterilize their seeds or we pour chemicals on the plants to promote, quote, healthy activity. And frankly, it's completely disingenuous for us to have done so. And one company, this is called the Indigo Company, has actually done a lot of work in this area, and what they have done is, because they can now sequence all these microbes, and they can actually do artificial intelligence to these microbes, have been able to acquire microbes from many countries under various levels of stress. And what has happened is that the biodiversity, and look at the far right, but the biodiversity of the modern agriculture compared to wild types of plants is 4 times less as far as its biodiversity in its microbiome effect. So what Indigo has done is they have looked at all the countries, many of the countries of the world, many of the crops of the world, and then how those countries and crops respond to various stress: water deprivation, too much sunlight, too little sunlight, drought, too much salt, and so on and so forth. They have sampled the microbiome of all of these plants under all of this stress. Then they have changed the biome based on patentable ideas for which they're not really that forthcoming, and they have been able to assess now how these clusters of microbiomes actually interact and actually lead to productive plants. And so when they're applied, and they have just now been applied this last year to cotton, you see the treated versus untreated, right and left of cotton plants in the same field. Different microbiomes and different levels of productivity of the plant. Now, this is just simple cotton. And this has been a very sophisticated approach to changing agriculture. Just imagine how provocative we'll be when we figured out what is the microbiome really need to be an astrophysicist. What does the microbiome really need to be a really good school teacher? What does a microbiome need to be to cure type 1 diabetes? That's coming. That's imminently coming. And so I'll move away from the microbiome of plants and agriculture and say, well, What happens when it is altered, when you alter your microbiome from normal? Clear evidence, depression, dementia, and autism are related to alterations of microbiome. Clear evidence of colorectal cancer, alterations of microbiome. Clear evidence that metabolic diseases, immune deregulation, and infections are all related to alterations in the microbiome. This is a maybe related thing. You see the infectious disease going down, and you see autoimmune disorders going up as we poisoned ourselves with a plethora of too many antibiotics that have clearly affected the diversity of your microbiome. So these are the illnesses that is a short list, there's many more, of diseases that are caused by antibiotic misuse or use. And many of these things are not only serious, they'll kill you. But here is another way in which we affect our microbiome. I went over this last year, different slide, but I went over the same experiment. It's been done. So if you take a thin mouse and you give them artificial sweeteners, you get a fat mouse that's got sugar diabetes. All right, let me go over this one more time. You take a thin person, you give them artificial sweeteners, it makes them fat and diabetic. All right? How? You take a thin mouse, you give them artificial sweeteners, you get a fat diabetic mouse. Now you take their poo-poo and you give it to another thin mouse and you get a fat diabetic mouse. Clear? All right. Artificial sweeteners changes your poo-poo. Now you go fat and diabetic. So you thought you were chasing calories away by taking artificial sweeteners, and you're actually poisoning yourself. It's a clear case of self-inflicted poisoning that our government is letting us do at a very rapid rate. And whether or not this is the only thing, it's not, that's responsible for the obesity explosion throughout the entire world, but it is one of the contributing factors. I'm absolutely clear, and it's actually one of the reasons that several years ago we removed artificial sweeteners from the heart hospital. So clearly there's other gut-brain axis involved. I'm not going to go into great detail here, but here's the things that we know affects the microbiomes are refined sugars and carbohydrates. You should eat vegetables, plants, whole grains, prebiotics that foster multiplication of good bacteria, fermented things. Fermented things are good. Yogurt, sauerkraut, kimchi, and one of my favorite, natto. This is fermented soybeans. Fermented soybeans, and it's an acquired taste, I promise. But fermented soybeans, which really are a Japanese delicacy. So, lifestyles that can affect our microbiome. The microbiome, as an organ, has its own circadian rhythm that matches your circadian rhythm. Numerous publications have shown this. So that when you take a nap, they take a nap. When you don't take a nap, they don't take a nap. So you got to nurture your microbiome. And it loves activity. Now, think about the attitude of an E. coli in your gut, okay? It's sitting inside a swamp. It gets fed 3 times a day. It is nice and warm. It's all cultivated. So that microbiome wants to do what? It wants you to be healthy. It wants you to be healthy because it wants to live a long time. Because this is a great place to live in an environment inside you in which I get everything that I need all day long. So it needs regular exercise and avoidance of antibiotics. Here is the revolution that's occurred, is that as the dollar amount for sequencing went dramatically down, so now we can sequence all these bugs, there has been an enormous increase in publication of medical research about these bugs. So this is the new organ that is being researched and is about to explode. And so for your gut, respect them, love them, care for them. They'll make you healthy. Thank you very much.